So here with me today, I have Sarah Diefendorf. She's the Executive Director of the EFC West, and she'll be your presenter today. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Laura.
Just quickly, before I turn the presentation over to Sarah, we have two polling questions for the audience. So I'm launching them now. The first is, what kind of water and or sewer utility do you represent? So we have 5 options for you to choose from here. The first being for-profit, municipality, not-for-profit, special purpose district, or if you're not a water or sewer utility, you can just choose the last one. So I see the votes are rolling in here. I'm just going to give a couple more seconds for attendees to answer. All right. So it looks like just over half are not a water or sewer utility, a little over a quarter are municipality, and then the others are kind of scattered between the other 3. We have one more poll, and this question is, what size water and or sewer system does your utility operate by number of people served? So as you can see, we have 5 options here, again, ranging from very small to very large. And then also, again, an option for not a water or sewer utility. So I'll just give a couple more seconds here for people to respond. All right. As we knew, about 50% of you guys are not a water or sewer utility, though it looks like pretty equally between very small, medium, large or very large utilities, and about 6% for small. So at this point, I am going to turn the presentation over to Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Laura. And see my little show my screen. I think you should let me know when it's up.
Perfect.
Are we good?
We're great.
All right. Okay, so I won't touch the other screen on the right because you told me not to. So welcome, everybody. And I'm glad you could all be here today. I'm looking forward to this. And I'm going to jump right in, and today we're going to actually talk about 2 different tools that we use to help you get your business done. And I use the word business intentionally because these are also tools that we teach within our business school, and especially within a program called the Green MBA, which is all about sustainable enterprise. Before we get to those tools, though, I want to touch a little bit on history, and in this case, the history of extreme weather events from 1980 to 2014. Actually, it's 2015. So if we start from 1980, when we elected President Reagan, and moved to 85, when Apple was just beginning its takeover of the world, and finally to 1989, when Time declared the Earth endangered. During that time period, we had 27 extreme weather events, each one costing over $1 billion. So let's go to 1990 to 1999. In 1990, we were entering the first Iraq War. In 1995, Newt Gingrich was king of the hill. And by 1999, Y2K was potentially going to destroy the world. And during that period of time, we had 48 extreme weather events, each one costing over $1 billion. From 2000 to 2009, in 2000, we had a contested presidential election. In 2005, we were wondering how we were going to get out of another Iraq war. And by 2009, we were looking at the first administration of President Barack Obama. And over that period of time, we had 54 extreme weather events, each one costing over $1 billion. So let's look at 2010 to 2015. In 2010, Mark Zuckerberg was the man of the year. In 2014, Ebola fighters were named the people of the year. And in 2015, at the end of it, we were looking at a potential run from Donald Trump as president. And during that period of time, 5 years, 59 extreme weather events occurred, each one costing over $1 billion. This is all NOAA data that we've collected this information from, and as you can look at this particular NOAA chart, you can see the steady uptick and increase in extreme weather events over time. Looking at it in a different way, if we look at extreme weather events, each one costing over $1 billion. We can look at those numbers again and note that the growth is almost exponential, so that in only a 5-year period, we've already beaten the records of the past many years at 59, so that by the end of this particular decade, we're going to be far surpassing the decades before us in extreme weather events, each one costing over $1 billion. If we look at the actual cost of those events, and each one of these is CPI adjusted, so this is an average of severe storms, droughts, floods, winter storms, wildfire, and tropical cyclones, the cost per event, we see severe storms can cost an average of $2.4 billion per event, drought $12.5 billion per event, flood $1.9 billion, winter storm $2.4 billion, wildfires $1.7 billion, and tropical cyclones take the prize at $21.9 billion per event on average, CPI adjusted. So when we think about the future, and we think about the future for our systems and our communities, we definitely think about droughts. I'm in California. We're entering our 5th year, I believe, of drought, so we for sure think about that in our planning. We think about floods, and we think about wildfires caused by droughts and the dryness and the heat that we're experiencing. But do we actually think about something like this? And yes, this is what you think it is. And we were in a small town up in Northern California in a county that's renowned for its high-end growth of good weed for this country. And we actually had to talk about the possibility of legalization of marijuana in California, because that's actually something that water systems need to think about as well, and communities should be thinking about. So it isn't just about disaster when we're thinking about resiliency. We're thinking about what happens, and this was a two-pronged possibility for this particular community if marijuana was legalized in California. On one end, it could mean a flood of population, a flood of people coming to increase the production and growth of marijuana, which means an increase in runoff, fertilizers, pesticides, and so on. Or it could mean that because it's now legal in California, the industry actually leaves the coast, which is quite hilly and mountainous and difficult to plant in, and moves towards our Central Valley, which is one of the bread baskets of the world. Thus, that small community up in Northern California and others like it end up with a population decrease and a loss of an economy, both of which are going to impact their water systems and their communities in a huge way. So resiliency doesn't just mean coping with disaster. It means coping with a future that is uncertain, but it's coming at us. So here's some more projections for the future. Nationally, they expect that agricultural production will increase by 4%, largely because of warming temperatures. But also because of warming temperatures, that's not necessarily going to be everywhere. They also expect that few eastern ski resorts will be economically viable beyond the next century. As a matter of fact, they predict only one, although they didn't say which one that would be. The variable here being that ski resorts need a certain number of snow days and a certain amount of snow to be viable and to be open long enough to get their return on investment. Because of warming temperatures, they may not get enough snow, in which case a lot of those resorts will have to close. And in Virginia and North Carolina, they may see trout losses that exceed 90% because of warming streams. Should this matter to a water system? Well, it should. Beyond just the water that we're talking about, beyond the lack of snow, beyond the warming rivers and streams, it's actually hits to local economies. And hits to local economies mean people may or may not be able to pay their bills, or they may move out. You'll have dwindling resources and so on. So we, again, don't need to just think about disaster in the future, but we have to think about our economies, our social systems, and so on when we think about long-term resiliency. Because ultimately what we're talking about here is complexity. We all work and live within a complex society. Our water systems are complex, our communities are complex, and we are faced with an even heavier and more dense layer of complexity as extreme weather events increase, as temperatures are expected to rise, as drought is expected to increase, and so on. Our futures are becoming more and complex, which means our futures are becoming more and more difficult to understand and predict. And so today we're actually going to introduce two tools to you. One is called PESTLE, and the other one is a wind tunnel. And we're going to start with PESTLE because the future is unknowable, but it will impact us. So what does PESTLE stand for? It's pretty simple, actually. P is for political, E is environmental, S is for social, T is for technological, E is for economic, and L is legal regulatory. PESTLE is essentially a simple tool, and it's a systemic tool so that we take a much more holistic and whole view of our system as opposed to just focusing in on the obvious things that we tend to focus in on always, such as extreme weather events, disasters, and so on. We use PESTLE to guide us to think beyond the box. And in a business school and within a business, we use PESTLE to test our opportunities and threats, which means that we use it for strategic planning, to help us identify stakeholders and allies, and for strategic and resilience planning. So it's very much a strategic planning tool as well. So if we're thinking about our opportunities and threats, which we should always do, if we start with political, okay, they're the obvious politicals out there, those of our country who are running for president at the moment. And we need to think about our future under each one of these potential presidents. Does it change? Does it matter? Does it impact us at the federal level? What kind of difference is it going to make if each one of these became president? It's worth thinking about our funding streams, whether or not the regulatory agencies that we count on will be funded over time. We need to think about these things. And even if the federal seems a little bit too hard to wrap our arms around, we certainly need to think about it at our local levels and at our county levels and at our state levels. What political things are happening out there? What political instances are happening that will impact our water systems and impact our cities and communities? E for environmental. We do tend to think of, like I said, the extreme weather events, but have we thought about a contaminant spill in a river that we depend on for our water? Have we thought about an increase in agriculture in our communities that will result in increased runoff and increased population growth? Or, close to home, where I live, we lost most of our Dungeness crab season due to toxic algae. People couldn't eat it. That really harmed a lot of small communities up and down the coast and impacted water systems as well. When we think of social, what about our population growth? When we look at our communities, are we planning for population increases and decreases? Are we thinking about what that kind of impact will be on our systems and on our communities? If we looked at some of these small counties and communities in Maryland, we can see that a number of them were not planning for the population increase they received. And while the increases are not huge by perhaps city standards, when you're growing from 90 to 312, such as Loudoun County, that makes a huge difference in planning for the future of your community. And we also need to think of other issues that occur in the social realm. The most recent foreclosure and recession that happened to all of our communities, all of the foreclosures and the loss of population and the loss of jobs and the loss of the ability to pay for services impacted us hugely. And to what degree did we anticipate any of that? Not that we could necessarily, but are we in the future? Are we already thinking about, well, what if this happened again? Even at a small level, how would we survive? How would we continue to provide the services we need to survive, to provide? Technological is always a sticky one. Are we looking at the possibilities of technological advances out there that will help our jobs? In this case, you have a drone doing water sampling. But is that drone also potentially putting you out of a job? Okay, so what are the technological advances that we might be able to anticipate that will change the way that we operate? Economic. Here you see is fracking. Fracking is increasing and also impacting communities on a huge scale, and they impact water systems greatly. Do we anticipate changes to our economies that will bring great changes to our watersheds and to the services we can provide? And finally, legal regulatory. Of course, we want to keep an eye on what's coming down the pipe from the Fed, but we also need to track what's coming down in a legal or regulatory way from our counties, from our local jurisdictions, from our states, and so on. Are we factoring those in to our planning efforts? So as I said, PESTLE is simple, but not necessarily easy, standing for political, environmental, social, technological, economic, and legal regulatory. PESTLE, we use it to look at all potential futures and to develop potential future scenarios. So if you were working, say, with your water system or with your community, you'd want to use PESTLE to start thinking about future scenarios, say bringing them out to April 2025. And so what you might come up with are things like recession. Think of these future scenarios as almost like headlines. What's happening on that day in 2025? It could be Giardia outbreak. How does that impact your water system? It could be 10 years of drought. US EPA budget cut 50%. New contaminant regulations. Pick your contaminant. Sudden population growth. Fracking arrives. Warmer winters equals increased ag production. New casino resort moves into town. Cheap solar is announced. And the incumbent mayor has just lost the election. Any one of these is a valid headline. Any one of these is a valid future scenario, and each one of them falls under one of the elements of PESTLE, so that PESTLE is guiding you to think beyond the box about what your futures may be, and also to think into how your future system and your current system will survive under any similar type of scenario. Once, if you're working with a team or if you're working with your water system, you've developed a group of headline scenarios, you want to plot them. And basically, you want to just take your scenarios, take your headlines, put them under low impact, high probability. And that's just something that you would want to think about on a larger scale just to be sure. But basically, you don't need to worry too much if you already assume that it will have a low impact on your community or your system. There's low impact, low probability. It doesn't impact you. It could impact others, but you're not as concerned about it. There's high impact, high probability. You're going to have to take active steps now to think about that. If you have a future scenario in there that you really think is likely, then you should be planning for it. And then there's high impact but low probability. You don't think it's going to happen, but if it did, you're in a lot of trouble. In that case, you need to have a plan in place. So the most two important areas that we're worried about and the scenarios that we really want to focus in on would be those under high impact and low probability and high impact, high probability. And you use that now to start thinking about your stakeholders and allies. So you have your headline scenarios that you've chosen to be high impact, low probability, or high probability. Who do you need to partner with? Who do you need on your side to actually either take active steps to deal with it or to put a plan in place so that you know who you're going to have to reach out to should any one of these scenarios comes to fruition? So here again, we want to think of PESTLE in terms of what is the world of potential stakeholders. So it isn't just about bringing an EPA or the city council or so on. Use PESTLE to guide you when you're thinking about stakeholders who can help you through these scenarios. Who is a political stakeholder? Who is a social stakeholder? What is a business stakeholder, and so on? And also think about your entire system. So these are all local stakeholders that you may need for a specific scenario. What about state stakeholders? Maybe you need state regulatory agencies involved and as a partner or on your side, or at least informing you if you're worried about a particular scenario. At the federal level, do you have to lobby a member of Congress? Do you have to talk to your congressperson? Are you concerned about that? At the global level, there may actually be an International Water Institute that is working specifically in your area that you might actually want to attend a conference or just reach out for information and material. And finally, there's the environment. What you're looking here are these circles within circles within circles is actually your system, the borders of your system, the pieces and parts of your system. Your water system is obviously within the local space, and then it goes out from there because each one is a system. And when you're talking about the environment, which obviously is the largest element of our system, you can always tap onto the environmental nonprofits to support your efforts if they exist within your area. So how does that play out? So if we have decided that the scenario of a 100-year flood is now projected to increase to every 10 years instead, who do we need as stakeholders to work with us? In this case, we've decided that we don't need the full realm of PESTEL. We don't need as many social stakeholders or legal stakeholders, but we do need environmental ones. We do need economic ones. We do need political ones to engage with us. So if we're concerned and if we are taking active steps to actually work towards protecting our community and our water system against an increase in flooding, we're going to have to talk with the city government and work with them. We may need the banks, and we may need to be working with FEMA on a regular basis before it happens. We may want to attend that stormwater management conference in London, and we probably want to talk and work with the State University floodwater experts. So that's one way in which we've used PESTEL to guide us not only in determining future scenarios, but future stakeholders as well. If we said we also think a fracking boom is really likely, well, in this case, again, not the entire realm of PESTEL, but we're really concerned about these social elements, about what might happen if there's water contamination. So the community really needs to be working with us, and we need to work with the community so that we can understand what their fears are, and also so they can identify if they find what they think are contaminants in their water, or if they think they're contaminants and there really aren't, and so on. We need to be working with the community. We need to coordinate with US EPA. We need to coordinate with the State Water Agency, and economically, with a fracking boom, we're probably going to have to hire new people. But if we come from a small community, we may actually have to go from the local to the state, even the national level, to find new employees, which is something that as a small system you may be facing, and it's daunting, the idea that you may have to hire 5 or 6 new people if you come from a really small community. So if you were going to do this as a team activity, the best way to approach it is ask your team to develop at least 2 scenarios, 2 each for PESTEL, political, environmental, social, technological, economic, and legal, regulatory. You would want them to prioritize all scenarios: high impact, low probability, high impact, high probability, low impact, low probability, and low impact, high probability. And then identify the stakeholders for each scenario that you've identified as high impact. And then once you've got that down, let's start moving into the wind tunnel. Okay? The name for this actually comes from various elements of what a wind tunnel is used for. The way that we think of it is a wind tunnel that is actually at University of California, Davis, and it has a whole model of the city of San Francisco inside the tunnel. So every time a new building goes up, inside is planned to go up in San Francisco, they plot it inside. They actually build a model of it inside the tunnel, and then they pump bits of different colored smoke into the tunnel to see what happens with various prevailing winds. What happens if the wind hits one building and bumps off of another building? Does it come down straight to the street and knock out pedestrians, or does it harmlessly move forward up into the sky? So they test the impact of wind on buildings as they go up into the city. Okay, so a wind tunnel is essentially a way of testing future wind scenarios. In our case, A wind tunnel is simply a way of testing future scenarios that you've identified with PESTLE. So you want to test your system, your water system, your community system, your larger system against future opportunities and threat scenarios. And this is, very simply, this is what a wind tunnel looks like. It's got a great name for what is just a very simple grid. You've got a number of different futures at the top. In this case, we've used PESTLE, so each future up there is identified with a particular element of PESTLE. So 2% tax on water bills creates a new statewide water agency. That's political. Bark beetle crashes lumber industry. That's environmental. Under social, there's an increase in agricultural production that brings a huge influx of farm workers to the community. Under technological, desalination technology becomes cheap and easy. Under economic, a cyber attack cuts internet access for 2 months. And under legal, local water systems are privatized. All of these actually were priority scenarios that were identified by water systems across the country. And we've just pulled them out and placed them into this one for an example for you to look at. You want to test these possible future headlines using PESTLE. That said, it may very well be that when your team puts together all these different scenarios, you may not have the full realm of PESTLE at the top. You may have 3 environmental and 3 economics. You may have 20 that you want to test. You're not limited to 6, and you don't have to have 1 for each element of the PESTLE when you're actually testing it against high impact. You just need to know that you've done your due diligence. You've actually looked systemically at potential scenarios. So that's what goes across the top. That's your future scenarios. What goes on the left is the potential to see through other stakeholder eyes, those who have been identified with the scenarios at the top. And that's probably one of the more important elements of your wind tunnel is you need to integrate not just your own system, so water system, but who else is in the community that can help make you resilient, that can help make your water supply resilient, your water services resilient under various future scenarios. Who else is in the room and how will their responses impact your system? In this case, we have local government, citizens, business communities, social services, schools, water agencies. We could have fire, we could have police. It's who you've identified as critical stakeholders. It could be someone from US EPA if you can get them in the room. It could be someone from a state regulatory agency and so on. And when we are thinking about our scenarios, we always like to include a black swan if we can. It's not necessary, but black swans are those things that happen that are almost unimaginable, that we can't believe that they would happen. But if they did, we would be locked down and out of business. We wouldn't be able to perform. We always want to think about what are those black swans. In our most recent history, of course, 9/11 was a huge black swan. It changed everything. And the recession, another black swan, changed everything and came upon us so suddenly. So these are things that, if they happened, we may not even be able to keep our doors open. So are we thinking about them? And it doesn't have to be that another 9/11 occurs, but what if transportation was locked down for a week or 2 weeks or even a month? What if we couldn't fly anywhere? What if the internet was knocked out? And so on. Even if it's not a month or 2 months or 3 months, what if we even if it were a week, could we survive underneath it? That's your black swan. So how does this work when you're actually working with the wind tunnel? What you want to do is look at your scenarios. Okay, in this case, a new administration in your local government, in your national government, the bark beetle, and a huge influx of immigrants. When you're actually working through a wind tunnel, the most important thing to remember is that for everybody who's a part of it, you, your water system, community members, businesses, and so on, you always want to say what it looks like under each one of these elements. So under environment and under bark beetle crashes lumber industry. If you've got lumber industry in the room, lumber industry is going to tell you it doesn't look good to them. They're not going to come up with solutions yet. You never want to come up with solutions right away. You want people to say what it looks like under each one of these scenarios, so together you can work to solution as a system and as a stakeholder group. So what does your community look like under various futures? What does California look like, or any state look like, if marijuana was legalized? What does it look like if you're a coastal community and desalination technology becomes cheap and easy, and so on? Here's an example of what it might look like in a box if we said, say, the state, under the political scenario, the state agrees to a 100% increase in commodity exports to China. Well, that means there's going to be a lot more, obviously, agriculture. In this case, they were actually thinking probably cattle would increase hugely in this particular area. This was in the middle of the country. And so the water system itself said what it looks like under that particular scenario. And in this case, agricultural demand for increased water is stressing systems' old pipes. The water system will need at least 3 new employees. High levels of pesticide and fertilizer and agricultural runoff impacts water quality. New farm labor moving to area creates a new housing and new water hookups needs. Okay, so they're saying what it looks like. Eventually, when you get to the point where everyone has decided what it looks like under each scenario, you're going to look back at these grids and try to see where you're resilient and where you're not. If the water system has a hole where they don't think they can provide a service, but perhaps the emergency services can fill that hole, then you understand that you actually are resilient as a community. Maybe not as individual entities, but when you look at how it looks for each one of you, you can start to mix and match, compare, and see who can fill the holes, who can't fill the holes, and what holes can't be filled at all. And that's actually where you find out whether or not you're resilient. Under each one of these scenarios, where are the holes? Okay, what can't you fill even when you've got all the stakeholders in the room? Or do you need other stakeholders to help you fill those holes? The inability to provide services, the inability to provide clean water, okay, and so on. And then finally, the final test, are you resilient? And so I'll end this with the definition of resilience so you can think about when you go through these exercises, is your water system resilient? Is your community resilient? Resiliency means the ability of a community to grow, resist, absorb, respond, and or recover in a timely and efficient manner, preserving or restoring its essential basic structures, functions, and identity. And that's resiliency, and that's what we're pushing for. And these are 2 tools that I would recommend that you try and use to see if your system and your community is resilient. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. So just a reminder to anyone that has any questions, any of our attendees, if you have any questions for Sarah on her presentation, you can just type it into the questions dialog box on your GoToWebinar control panel. We have a couple other polling questions to ask, so I'm going to go ahead and launch those right now. The first is we have a blog here at the EFC. If you guys would like to subscribe to that, please just select yes, and we will go ahead and do that for you. So I'll give a couple seconds for people to answer this here. And I also believe you can go to our website, efcnetwork.org, and sign up there as well. All right. And the second question that we have here is if you are a small water system, so that's 10,000 people or fewer, 10,000 or fewer people served, are you interested in receiving in-depth technical assistance? If so, just click yes, and we'll have one of our staff members follow up with you to see what ways we can assist you with. And again, this form can be accessed online at efcnetwork.org, just in case you don't answer this right now and you want to go back and apply for technical assistance. All right. So Sarah, right now it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in. Are there any other points you really wanted to go over, or something that people normally have questions about that you maybe want to expand on?
Just that I would say if people are interested in trying these tools, they're simple and they're not simple, and we would love to assist any community or water system that was interested in attempting either a wind tunnel or working through Pestle. Please reach out to us because we'd love to help you work through it either with your system or your community. I'd also kind of like to emphasize the one thing that keeps coming to the forefront when we discuss resiliency with a number of systems, but also with communities and so on, is that a lot of systems have a lot of difficulty reaching out to additional stakeholders, and so they oftentimes work within a vacuum. And we're trying to emphasize and trying to help systems as well work through the possibilities of partnering up within their communities so that plans aren't happening sort of in a vacuum apart from each other. And we were talking yesterday about how there was a community that basically the water system was relying on a certain water supply, whereas the watershed plan, which had never been tested or worked with, or the stakeholders did not come together, basically disallowed the use of that particular, I guess it was a stream at the time, for any additional water use. So you had two plans that basically were in direct disagreement with each other. And so it's very important for organizations to start thinking about, and systems to start thinking about, bringing in external stakeholders to plan for the future, especially sometimes even their ratepayers.
Great, thank you. So we have a couple questions coming in. One is, where can the audience go to learn more about resiliency?
Ooh, boy. I'll tell you what, I think maybe what we can do is list some resources on the EFCN website. I don't have them off the top of my head, but it's a pretty big topic right now, and there's probably a lot of disagreement on what resiliency really means. So I think it would be best if the EFCN network starts to list materials that we like that teach a lot more about resiliency.
Great. And the next question is there a book we can get to help us through this process?
The process of?
I'm assuming through Pestle and the wind tunnel?
Not really. It is taught, and I have actually never seen sort of a book on Pestle or a book on wind tunneling. And I will admit that this is a lot of information to give people in a simple webinar, which is why we offer ourselves to help through the process as best we can. And we would love to give you a hand. We just wanted to introduce these tools and let people know that we will be using these tools in our resiliency workshops across the country.
Okay, great.
We can learn more that way.
All right. So this person is asking, has your organization facilitated any tabletop exercises to assist entities in integrating Pestle into their operational plans?
Yes. And we have done it for operational plans. We have done it for strategic plans. We've worked with a lot of different organizations. These are actually just two tools. We have a number of different tools we use to identify stakeholders, access stakeholder knowledge, all of that, so it can be integrated into the planning process for resiliency. So yes, we have.
Great.
And by the way, I should mention, and what I failed to mention, is that when you are doing these grids, they're on huge pieces of paper, butcher paper, spread across a table, and people are taking stickies and putting them into the boxes with how it looks under each scenario. So it's a big group effort working together in a room. We have seen some instances where there's software, but we don't really like it. We prefer, in this case, to do it face-to-face. We really don't like remotely trying to work through this process. All
right. So we have one more question. this question is, any information on adaptive management and how it would apply to this scenario?
Is there any way we can get a little bit more information on the question?
Yeah, if the person that sent that question in, if you want to just add any more clarifying, information, that would be great. So we'll just wait a second, see if they send it.
And we can always take it offline as well if you'd like to.
Yes, and just to share with you all now, if you do have any questions, you can just email Sarah at this address that is listed right here, or also if you have any other questions that you'd like me to direct towards her, you can always email me as well. So let's see. So this person, so basically he's asking, is there any difference between the two, or are they different approaches?
Between the two meaning pestle and wind tunnel, or through?
Yes, I would believe between pestle and wind tunnel. If you want to clarify that as well, you're welcome to.
Well, pestle feeds wind tunnel. If you're going to do scenario building, you need a place to put your scenarios. And so the pestle actually feeds the wind tunnel so that you can move into a planning process looking at those scenarios. You can look at your scenarios in different ways. You don't have to use a wind tunnel. But they are two separate tools.
Okay, we also just got another clarifying comment. He's saying adaptive management and then the two mentioned here. Are there differences?
I guess I'm not really sure what he means by adaptive management. So maybe I hate to drag this out for the rest of the people here. So
yeah. So to the person that's sending in the questions, we can follow up with you offline, and definitely send an email to clarify any questions that you have. So it looks like that's all the questions we have. Sarah, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, other than, like I said, the fact that this is all built into resiliency workshops. So if you're interested, please sign up for them if we're in a community near you. And we can actually walk you through the process. You can practice with it and just get a lot more comfortable with it. All
right. Great. And just before we go, as you probably all saw, I just pushed out a survey, a quick Google link survey about this webinar. If you would just take the time to respond. If you don't have the time now, there will also be a follow-up email that will be sent out within the next day or so with the link to the survey, as well as a link to the website where you can download the slides and view a recording of the webinar. So thanks to all of you for joining us today, and thank you, Sarah, for the presentation.